So some time ago I made a design chat on the horror of PT, and that's not going to be the only horror-based design chat. Today we're talking about the SAX, the Nightmare, and Metroid Fusion. Apologies if my voice is a little bit off in this episode, or I'm a little bit calm and quiet. My throat's a bit gone, so it's a bit of an issue. It shouldn't really affect uploads at all because I've already recorded some stuff in advance, but it's gonna affect this episode because my throat's borked, so that's fun. If you're not aware of the events of Metroid Fusion, what's wrong with you? Go watch my Let's Play. Once you're done with that, come back here. Watched it? Yeah? Okay, good. The SAX is, in essence, Samus. The game makes that very clear. It's sort of a clone, but a mindless clone. It's a killing machine. Again, the game makes this obvious. Now, why is the SAX an excellent horror device? Well, a prime element of horror is turning things on their head in a disturbing manner. The SAX does this quite nicely. It is, in a sense, a mirror. It's, well, a mirror image of Samus, specifically. There are a lot of cultures that hold mirrors as a little bit spooky, because they seem unnatural. They're a reflection of something else. They're you, but not quite, not as everyone else sees you, and they're kind of strange. Now, of course, we don't really see mirrors that way, not in our culture, but there's a reason that that's a thing. It's an element of horror, as I said, turning things on their head. It's you, but it's not quite. It's sort of a case of the uncanny. The SAX is this. Another element of the SAX is the monster. Throughout Metroid Fusion, the SAX follows you around, trying to kill you, hence its killing machine nature. But it doesn't have any kind of character development, any empathy, and this is intentional. It works very nicely. A monster that's trying to kill you and has nothing better to do than to do that specifically is a pretty terrifying thing, and it keeps players on edge. The other advantage of the SAX is the little chase sequences. They keep the players aware of the SAX. If the game set these events into motion and then just never really did anything with it and just said, hey, this thing is here, it's dangerous, it wouldn't be a very interesting antagonist, but because of the fact that you see the SAX in more than a few areas, and the fact that it chases after you and tries to actively kill you, certainly gives it a substantial amount of weight. Another element of it is the fact that the SAX isn't just full of hot air. The game's not just saying it's dangerous. It is dangerous. The SAX can kill you quite easily, especially early on. In the very early stages of the game, Samus is infused with Metroid DNA. The Metroids are prone to being frozen. As such, Samus is now prone to being frozen, and the SAX, being Samus at full power, has the Ice Beam at its disposal, which not only pierces targets, but freezes them solid. It's a pretty lethal weapon, especially to someone with a vulnerability to cold. The SAX also has the Screw Attack, which is generally considered the most powerful weapon in Samus's arsenal, excluding maybe the power bombs. The Screw Attack has the ability to kill almost any enemy in the Metroid games with little to no effort by simply running into them. No other weapon has that kind of ability. The SAX's uncanny quality of being Samus, but not quite, being extremely powerful, and being nothing but a monstrous killing machine, makes it a very scary thing to deal with. Compare that to the Nightmare, which is also a pretty horrifying monster, but for different reasons. The Nightmare is an example of hype in horror. This creature in and of itself isn't especially powerful. It's just a standard boss about halfway through the game. It's not very lethal. The Nightmare isn't quite as horrifying as the SAX is. It's certainly not as powerful, and it's not as uncanny. It's just kind of monstrous. That's about it. The reason the Nightmare usually gets to people is because, one, the monster itself is pretty grotesque. I mean, look at that face. That's some nightmare-inducing shit right there. The other element of it is the hype. The game talks about this thing at length and gives you quite a nice idea of what it can do. Now ultimately, the monster doesn't really live up to this projection, but it's still pretty intimidating. The nightmare is an example of the shadow in horror. You see something scary, come to find out it's really not that scary, it's just bigger. It's been projected as something much more intimidating than it really is. You see a nightmarish shadow on the wall, only to find out it's just a cat. The nightmare is a very good example of this. The creature itself is pretty grotesque, but it's certainly not as powerful as Adam would lead you to believe. Even still, the nightmare has build-up much like the SAX. You see it early on in Sector 5, flying around in the background. It's kind of intimidating, making the whole area shake, but it doesn't seem scary per se, just kind of dangerous. Later on, you come back to Sector 5, and the area has been practically leveled in the first room, where you saw the nightmare flying around. In fact, the room's design has been completely redone. There are walls that weren't there, there are walls that were there and aren't anymore, and there's even a section of the area completely missing because it was destroyed. You expect something final boss worthy. Ultimately, the nightmare fails in this regard, but it's because of hype. The SAX, on the other hand, not so much. Now, do I think these things are perfect by any means? No. There's problems with both. The SAX, for example, the fight's very repetitive, and it's not especially interesting or intimidating. There's the threat of death because the SAX itself can bash into you over and over with the screw attack, which does a lot of damage, but ultimately, there's nothing much else. Nothing too scary about it. The SAX is something akin to your old slasher villains, like Jason Voorhees and Michael Myers. It's a very powerful force, and it kind of ignores anything you choose to throw at it. The only thing I find kind of disappointing about the SAX is the fact that it ends up in a proper final boss fight. I honestly think a better way of going about it would have been to have the SAX trapped and blow up the station with it. Ultimately, that's what you do with the other set that the computer implies, but you don't do it with that one specifically. You kill it, which proves that Samus can. It's just very difficult. I think a better idea would have been to make the game end with the SAX nearly killing you, and something interfering to save you. The game establishes that there's an Omega Metroid on the station, so perhaps a better idea would have been to skip the fight with the SAX, go straight to the Omega Metroid, but instead of encountering the Omega Metroid first, you encounter the SAX first. The SAX throws you around a bit, the Omega Metroid comes in and kills it. In exchange, you absorb the X from the SAX, the Omega Metroid sees you as a threat, you proceed to kill it and escape the ship. Granted, that would be 2 back-to-back boss fights, but because of the SAX's X-Core healing you, it wouldn't really be that much of an issue. And technically, it's only the one boss, because you're only really fighting the Omega Metroid. The SAX is more of a scripted sequence, a fight you're expected to lose. And it's not a case that they couldn't do it. They did it in Super Metroid. The fight with Mother Brain at the end of the game is something you're supposed to lose at first. Mother Brain nearly kills you in a scripted event, then the baby Metroid shows up, saves you, etc., and you finish the game. Maybe the developers thought that it'd be a bit too cliche to do what Super Metroid did all over again. Maybe they wanted to do something original. Which is a fair point. I don't know. I don't work at Nintendo. I do know this much, though. The SAX was a step in the right direction as far as horror elements go. Now, Dark Samus was also interesting, but Dark Samus in the Prime games was more interesting as a villain and less so as a horror monster. Anyway, that's going to be it for this video. If you got anything to say, be sure to post it in the comments below. And since I haven't plugged it in quite a while, maybe ever, I don't quite remember, if you don't, follow me on Twitter. I predominantly post information about the channel, changes to the schedule, etc. on there. If you don't have a Twitter, well, you know, maybe check in from time to time. There's a link there on the YouTube channel. Might do you good if there's suddenly a gap in videos to go check there. I've probably said something about it. Pretty soon I'm also going to be adding a link to the Twitch channel for the channel. I intend to do some streams sometime soon. I'm not exactly certain yet. There's a couple of games I have in mind, but I can't do them for one reason or another, and I'm trying to get a bit of a backlog on videos, so it's a bit of a pain. But there should be streams sometime in the not too distant future. I don't know if it'll become a regular thing or if it'll just be a little side thing I do whenever I feel like it. But yeah, they should be a lot of fun. As for the schedule for these design chats, there will be the other M design chat, but that won't be till the end of the month. In fact, it's going to be going up on Easter Sunday, so get excited for that. Should be pretty good. There will also be one more next weekend, if I can get it edited in time. Otherwise, it might be going up on the Monday after, but I should be able to post it in time. Currently, the next design chat is between a few different things. One, there's the correlations between the Metroid series and the Alien series, the elements of speedrunning and sequence breaking in Super Metroid, and the Prime Games expansion on the Metroid universe. If there's one you'd like to see over the others, be sure to post a comment. Tell me which one you like. I'm not quite certain which one I'm going to do next, and I certainly can't do them all this month. There might be another Metroid month sometime down the line, but it's not going to be this year, I can tell you that much. Anyway, that's going to be it. There should be a Metroid Prime episode up tomorrow. If there's not, it's because my voice got worse. Sorry for that. Otherwise, I'll see you guys next time.